Hi there, we're back with Nathan Bird. He's a retired technical sergeant with the U.S. Air Force. I get that right, Nathan?
Yeah.
Before the break, we were talking about a massive withdrawal out of Qatar, and what you had talked about was a C-17, is that right? Was circling, providing cover while this mass exodus of all these different aircraft took our personnel, and we were withdrawing. So we'll pick back up there.
That mission was to draw down Bagram, which was the last base we had people at.
Okay.
Bagram was like the Atlanta airport of Afghanistan for military.
The main hub.
Yeah. Shortly after those planes launched, they had 2 B-52s take off, full of bombs, and the plan was when we withdrew from our bases that we created, we're turning them over to the Afghan National Army, and they weren't large enough to cover some of like the forward operating bases and even some of our bigger bases. They just didn't have enough people. So
Afghanistan didn't.
yeah. So any base that we were not given to at the Afghans, the B-52s dropped bombs on all of them, destroying everything.
Leave nothing behind.
Yep, nothing behind. And that was right after they pulled the last guy up on the 17, and they took off from Bagram and all came back together. And we all celebrated like, we did it.
Success story.
We got all of them out.
Yeah.
And
so these B-52s, they bombed that area because you weren't staying. Is that what you're saying with those?
yeah, so the Afghan National Army was going to take over. Like they took over Bagram, and
Right.
we're going to utilize all that stuff. But some of the bases that were, not inactive, but like it's hard to explain. There's some bases strategically located that we didn't want the Taliban to have, so those were blown up.
Understood.
So, but yeah, then they come back, and 2 days later we're on a plane going back to Charleston, and we all thought it was done.
Mission accomplished.
Yep, all the soldiers are out of Afghanistan, and then there's some rumbling going on, like among the leadership, like, well, what about all the special immigrant visas that we've handed out to interpreters that have helped us for 20 years? People like that.
Promises were made to these people.
100%.
Yeah.
And, that side of it, the State Department clears all that. So why would you, I might get a little angry, but why would you withdraw all your forces out of Afghanistan and then go back and get the special immigrant visas personnel?
Because who's going to protect that?
There's no protection.
Right.
And we heard what's going on. Okay, now we're going to send all the planes back over there again and start, moving people out.
Does this feel like a oops, I forgot?
This feels like leadership does not know what's going on. Like it's like they were like, we don't really know what's happening, And the Ranger Regiment came down from Pope, and they staged out of Charleston. So they literally had their packs, unpack it, Sergeant Major checked them, packed it, they got on the jet and did a double air refuel and landed in Kabul. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, the audience that's going to see this, but 17 that, had people all over it taxiing. Did you see that?
Yes. Now you're talking about trying to exit and people desperate to get on that plane.
Right. So the ramp never opened on that airplane. And I know the FCC, and the conversation they had to have in the cockpit as a crew.
We can't take off. We have people doing this.
Was okay, if we stop, we're going to get overran, like Mogadishu. And they weren't being violent. They were just that desperate to leave because the Taliban, I mean, they're smart. They already had the city surrounded. Most of the bases that we gave them are theirs now.
Because the Afghanistan army wasn't prepared to protect themselves in those places that we left for them.
Yeah, so, sorry, we got super busy there at Charleston again, and as things were happening, that plane and the conversation they were having, like, we're going to take off and we're going to kill people.
Because they're attached to our plane.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, but intentionally, because if we take off, they're going to die.
Yeah, and I know the pilot that was on there too, and they decided to kick rocks and go for it, and they had 1 or 2 people fall out of the gear, and there was people up inside the gear, and when it's retracted, there's no room in there, and it smashed 2 of them. And the left side gear and the right side gear, when the gear door closes, there's 3,000 PSI holding it closed. And it got this dude, like, arm was like inside the gear. So until they got to cruise, he was just flapping and hitting the jet. And of course they landed back at Qatar, and the pilot went to ops, and he just broke down on the floor crying. And that's where my rage kind of started. Like, not rage, but just angry. I was angry at our leadership. Like, we're the Air Force. Why would we do something dumb like that?
Well, you're watching this from stateside. You couldn't be over there.
I couldn't be over there because I had a broken rib. And medical wouldn't release me, even though the commander and all the FCCs wanted me to fly.
You wanted to be over there. You kind of had a meltdown because you couldn't be over there to help out because you were emotionally attached to this area, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're having to watch it on TV, and you were dealing with your own demons of, I should be there, as you watch it all unfold.
Yeah. I mean, I can place myself in the cockpit, and obviously I wasn't there for that, but I've flown so much, I could picture myself there and what the conversation would be like, because it would be horrible. And before they landed, they had to go out over the ocean and cycle the gear 4 or 5 times and over a Navy ship and try to get whatever falls out of it. But there was 2 guys, the gear posts are like this, and they were just straight through them. That, once again, the guys I was leading over there that stayed behind had to clean up. But then the question rolls back to July 3rd, and all the hard work that we did getting our troops out. And now I'm seeing an airplane that looks like it's out of a zombie movie, taking off and crushing people. And now they're like, oh, well, we got to secure the airfield. Well, guess what? It was already secured
before you
in
extracted.
May.
Yeah.
So the base was already secure, and the question was why didn't we do that? Why didn't we withdraw these special immigrant visas before we took all of our troops out? And as I mentioned before, like all the things that happened during that, all the logistics that they had to do to get people there to clear the runways, it was a massive force. And the people that died there, our guy said it wasn't right. And you should never put a crew in a situation to land at an overrun airport. But that was their direction, coming from our higher leadership. And
So what did that do to you emotionally?
emotionally, I really was like, just why? Like, what? Just confusion a little bit. And had a couple drinks, and I was like watching, not TikTok, was it Snapchat videos and videos that my guys were sending me. And I just had a breakdown. I had a breakdown, and in the kitchen, Liz was with me, and I cried and cried, and all I could say was like, all for what? And she said the same thing.
All for what? Like all of our people were there. We
All
did
for
this.
what?
We did this occupation. We were trying to do this good.
Like,
And then, yeah.
and when you leave a war zone, it's never going to be pretty. You get
Right.
it. But this is completely avoidable.
Completely avoidable?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, all these things are going through my head, like, why did I take this trip to Afghanistan to miss Braden's birthday, or, a holiday? And then what was all my efforts for when I was on the ground there, I met Afghanis, and we paid for a goat one time and killed it and ate it. It was awesome. Literally marched a goat through the gate. But there I was on the floor, and all the memories are coming back, and the two guys we loaded up while I was there, like, what was it for? And I kind of just blacked out that night, and I'm not drunk, but just mentally, I don't remember exactly what I did, and I know I went to bed. And then went to work the next day, and the senior master sergeant, he's like the superintendent of all the operations that are going on. And I was the flight chief for AR shop, so he always come talk to me like, hey, what do you got planned for today, and blah, blah. And he asked me how I was doing, and I looked him in the eye, and I said, I'm not okay. And he just kind of looked at me like, he didn't say anything. And
Like, what do I do with this?
And then I told him, I was like, it took everything inside my body to put this uniform on today. I don't want to wear it anymore. Like, it's embarrassing what y'all did. And you said y'all because he's in leadership. I can't cuss on here, but the most effed up thing about this is the Taliban have refuge in Qatar. When Trump met them and originally sat down and said, hey, it's going to be a peaceful withdrawal. If not, I know where you live, we're going to kill you. Handshake deal, right? That's where they stayed. They stayed there until all of the people that were going to take out got taken out, and then the Taliban controlled Kabul, which is the capital, and Qatar Air Force has 4 C-17s that they bought from Boeing.
From who?
From Boeing. That they own, they use them for their military. The mechanics that they hire to work on those are Americans. So you'll sign a contract right out of the military with them and you go over there and work. So the planes are maintained by Americans and flown by the Qatari pilots. The Taliban have refuge in Qatar. They drove the Taliban leaders right beside all of our planes. Right beside them. Went right by the hangar and see thousands of people. And right to their airplane. And they loaded them up on a C-17. Qatari. American airplane mechanics taxied them out. Flew them to Kandahar.
So the significance of them flying them by, driving them by rather, and then turning it right back over. Just help me piece that together for everybody that's here.
Yeah, so the Taliban leaders were in refuge in Qatar.
Right.
And they waited there until all the Afghanistan shenanigans was done. They waited until the Taliban had complete control of Kabul. And that's when they left Qatar. And they utilized the Qatar Air Force's C-17. And to get to those planes, you have to drive by all of our U.S. planes.
And they escorted them.
And the hangar, the
Right.
big hangar had the doors open. You had thousands of Afghanis in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right beside all that. And loaded them up on a C-17 that's maintained by U.S. personnel.
And flew them in there.
And
Yeah.
flew them to Kandahar.
Kandahar is where you were spending time. Kandahar is where you put a lot of time, effort, and blood, sweat, and tears into helping the Afghanis. You felt like...
Betrayal.
There you go. Yeah. Which pieced into then your question of why. What's the point of it all?
All for what?
Yeah.
So that bit happened, and then continue working. Finally, we had some jets come back and offload, some in Charleston, but most of them were going other places around the States. So we weren't as busy as we were. And then we got a call. We have there's a runway in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and it's owned by Charleston Air Force Base, and it's just for special ops type of stuff like flying, complete black landings and all that. And they had a problem with one of the planes. And so me and went up there to fix the plane. We fixed the plane, ops checked it, and then they wanted us to wait around till the next day for the pilots to take the jet and just make sure they're okay with everything. So we stayed in a hotel in Orangeburg, and of course we drank some beers, and we came back from that trip, and somehow we ended up at Charlie's house, and his wife and child were visiting family in Florida, and he's like, Nate, just stay as long as you want, we can drink. And Torres was there, another guy from the shop, and we were just talking about life and whatever else, and I couldn't stop drinking. And he let me crash on his couch, and I woke up and my wife was there. She was holding my head, like rubbing my hair. And then John Speaks was there. He was actually in Kandahar the same time I was. He was a senior master sergeant and my first sergeant. And they're like, you need some help. It's time to stop trying to do it on your own. You need to get help. So it confused me in the beginning because I told the first sergeant, I was like, don't screw me over on this. Like,
what does that mean? And for your military career, what do you mean? Don't screw me over, what do you mean?
Well, any alcohol-related incident, like, there was no incident because I wasn't like, I'm not an angry drunk. But, that could have been reported.
And if it had been reported, what did that mean for you?
Paperwork. It could be in Article 15, whatever the commander decides.
Okay.
They drove me to Somerville Hospital, and they immediately put me in the psych ward. I've never been inside one of those in my life.
Can never say that again.
I'm sitting there in a chair, and another guy's sitting in a chair beside me, and he's dead asleep. And then the other kid is snoring. He's literally sleeping like this and just snoring, like zonked out. And then the dude next to me starts yelling, like, don't let him get me. Where's the jungle? Like, all these things. And I'm just in there, like,
why am I here?
Hungover.
Yeah.
And they had given me some medicine to kind of calm me down, I guess. And, I was there for 8 hours or so, and then they discharged me. And in the meantime, John Speaks and Charlie had set up an appointment with mental health for me. And I went there and met my appointment. And John said, he's like, I'm going to go back and talk to this person before you go back there. And I don't know what he said, but I'm sure a lot of the therapists there deal with people that have hurt feelings, or, there's not a lot of PTSD in the Air Force. Pilots, obviously, but, so anyways, I go in there, and it's the director's office, and she's like, have a seat. I'm like, okay. And she started going over with me about a place in Emerald Coast. It was in Florida, Panama City. And she said they send all the special operation guys there, pilots and whatever else. It's actually a military resiliency unit. So off I went to that. I told them yes. I spent 35 days there.
Did you know you were going in for rehab at the time?
Yeah.
So you were submitting to the rehab process.
At that point, I was.
Okay.
And
Who'd you tell outside of the military?
Mom,
It's quiet. You're not.
my
This is
grandparents on
yeah.
my mom's side, and just behind locking doors, like didn't have no strings on my shoes, like the pillows suck so you can't suffocate yourself, like all these weird things,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, it took me like 4 days, and they would consistently check my blood pressure, you know, coming off of alcohol. They had some kind of medicine they were using too. And the 4th day, I started feeling a little better. And 5th day, I felt pretty good.
But detox is not for the weak. Detox
Oh,
was
it's terrible.
Yeah.
It initiated nightmares for me. And, you know, some of the dreams were from other missions that were sketchy.
So bringing
And
back memories, you have to
yeah,
relive all over again.
To
Yeah.
the point where, like, I peed the bed
Yeah.
out of
Fear.
Fear.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew, like, that I had some kind of problem, you know. But anyways, went through their process. There was people in there from all branches, and everybody was dealing with their own thing.
You able to talk to them?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a open floor plan, and then they have like a couple rooms they utilize. But
You sharing stories as
Yeah.
you're living there, passing
Yeah.
the time.
yeah,
Is it good to be with people that get where you're at rather than people like me that haven't ever spent time in the military?
well, I like both, you know, but coming out of that, I can sense a person who is struggling with the same things I got.
Explain that.
I just know the signs of alcoholism,
Okay.
you know, and I don't know if I should use his name or not, but a couple months ago, my buddy calls me up, and he's driving from Myrtle Beach back to Monk's Corner, where we live.
Back to where?
Back to Monk's Corner, which is
Okay.
near Charleston. And he said, "Hey, I got to talk." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Meet me at this Mexican restaurant." You know, it's normally loud in there. So I go in, get a table, facing the door, and he comes in. I give him a big hug, and I ain't seen him in a little bit. And he sat down, and he's like, "I don't know what to do. You know, she wants to leave me, and she says it's because of my alcohol use."
You know exactly how this feels, right?
Oh yeah,
You've lived this.
exactly. And so I stopped him and I said, "Let me just talk for a minute." And I told him my story, because I didn't talk about it when I got back to work. I didn't talk about it to anybody, and nobody ever mentioned it. But I told him, you know, my story through rehab and how much that helped in therapy. And he's a very strong-headed fella, you know, just like me. And I told him, I was like, "Look, I'm here to help you in any way possible." And you know, he was crying at that point, and he's like, "Nate," he's like, "I need something like that." He said, "I had half the mind to blow my brains out this morning before I called you." And I said, "Well, that's selfish."
Good.
And I said, that means you're going to let your demon win, you know? through that crap. I told him about Emerald Coast and how, it's a psych ward, but it's probably the best psych ward you can go to, just because of the freedom and all that stuff. But their therapists, like each person has their own therapist and psychiatrist. And I went to mental health with him, and he said yes. And he was in a little bit longer than I was, and called him every Friday. I'd call him. It's either Thursday or Friday. And I knew the rules, like,
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I could just tell the difference over time. Like each week I would talk to him, he sounded better.
You see it working.
Better.
Yeah.
And 3 weeks into it, 3.5, he calls me randomly. And he's like, Nate, I've read these books. I gave him a couple books that I read through that really helped me. He says, I've read through that, and I've got a Bible sitting here. And he's like, I don't know where to start reading. And that's a weird question for me, So I said, well, read Matthew or Mark, and then go read Romans. And then, from there, once you get that done, I'll give you some of the chapters or whatever. And he took off and did his thing, man. He came back talking about it, the day he got back, they flew him out there. I left work and I went over there and gave him a huge hug. And I told him how proud of him I was of him. And God used me to my story, as messed up as it is, to help him.
Isn't that cool?
And since then, I've had many more phone calls. And, not to that point, but some guys dealing with some stuff, So, all for what?
Going back, all for what?
Listen, all for what?
Yeah.
Turns into...
The answer to that question.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what it's all for.
It's interesting. The question at your lowest point seems to be universal. Why? All for what? It all boils down to the same thing. Why am I here? Why did I have to go through this? What now, Lord? Even if you're not a believer, what's next? Do I just end it now? What's the point? All of that.
Yep.
And for users, they might decide I'm just going to overdose because then I just don't have to deal with it anymore. For people that don't want to have to go through that, they might decide my gun might be easier, right? Or I'll tie a rope around my neck. Other people, huh?
Never mind. I'm not going to share what I was about to say.
Yeah. Other people are looking for what's the best way, but this life is empty if this is all there is. There is no point. Mm-hmm. I thought I had a reason. I had this. I was doing good, and then this happened. So, and the only answer that I found, I know your answer as well, is what God provides on the other side of that question.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe just as sure as I'm sitting here at my point, what I've shared, so when I reached that point, that was the only place I could turn because I didn't have any answers anymore. Yeah. And I'm the answer guy. I'm the fixer guy. And when I didn't have any, there's no good reason for why I'm here right now, and I'm facing death.
Yep.
If there isn't a God, I might as well just experience death because it is pointless. And this whole life I didn't need to exist. But the other side of that question, when God gets a hold of you and he shows you the reason why, there's no words that explain it. The peace that passes understanding is a peace that passes understanding. You can't put words to it. You have to experience it. And when you've experienced it and you can share with somebody else and they're willing to take the plunge, the guy said, I've read your books, man. I've got the Bible here. Where do I start? It's a great question.
Yeah.
And you took him to the gospel. You know, there's a reason for existence. And Matthew and Mark are great places. Romans, that's deeper, right? Now that you got Matthew and Mark, okay, here's what you do with
Romans
that.
is great.
Yeah, my favorite book of the Bible. But for those unbelievers that don't believe, why not give that a shot, right? If alcohol isn't it for you, if drugs aren't it for you, if whatever you're trying, sex, whatever it is, your coping mechanism, if that doesn't do it for you, God will. And the truth of the matter is, all that is empty and all that will dead end eventually because it's destructive.
And that's kind of like with my story too is, you know, all these corners I was taking, trying to find something, you know, to help me with PTSD.
Yeah.
And alcoholism, which was not God.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was in rehab, it was about 2 weeks in, I had my military watch. It wasn't a, you know, fancy watch that connects to your phone. And wake up time was 6:30. And I'd set my alarm on my watch for 5. And I would get up, and they had a coffee machine like 24/7, so I'd get a coffee. And then I started reading the Bible, and I just started where I've always started, in Psalms and Proverbs. And you know, you can beat those to a dead horse, but the wisdom of God is you know what I need. And
well, in military terms, that's your marching orders, right?
Yeah.
Your life's marching orders.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the first time I actually, like, broke down the verse or the chapter myself in, like, my own words. And, you know, that stuck with me. People say, read your Bible every day. You know, it is one thing that helps me whenever I'm overwhelmed. Like our last break, I went and sat in the car. And then anytime we were in danger, I would sit there and say out loud, you know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And He led me through the valley of the shadow of death so many times.
Yeah.
And
literally.
Looking on that, you know, God was there the whole time.
Because getting to the point of it all, God could use anybody.
Anyone.
But He wants to use you.
Yes.
He's got your name on future missions He wants to use you for. He's not done with you yet because you're still breathing.
Yeah.
He's not done with you yet because your brain's still operating. And you can't wake up in the morning and tell your brain to operate. That's God, right?
Yep.
You can't force your lungs to work. That's God. How often do you think about it? Your heart beating, right? So the fact that God could use anybody to do whatever we're doing, He doesn't need us. He wants us, is the why. And He allowed you to go through whatever you went through because this is a decision you made. I mean, you had free will, right? But at the end of it all, He still has a reason and a mission for you. And part of that is helping people that have been through what you went through, clearly, right? What would you say about that?
It just feels natural to help somebody like that now, you know? I don't want to say it feels good because, you know, they're in a crappy spot, but it feels good when, you know, like when Paul went to recovery and he came out. Now we're going to celebrate recovery every Friday, and he's reading his Bible, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to say, but to thank God for all the experiences that I've had.
Because they led you to what?
They led me to help people, and they led me to,
The
His
relationship
word.
you have with God right now, right?
Yes, correct.
Isn't it neat that God will take us through hell and high water to have the relationship He wants to have with us?
Mm-hmm.
I can say no and just tighten that screw a little bit more. I can say no, and just tighten, but at some point in the belly of that fish, I'm going to say, all right, God, I want a relationship. And He's there, and He's waiting. He's never, I told you so, it's never, you should have said it sooner. He's like, great, let's pick up where we left off, and here's what I have for you. But God, I don't want to do that. Wait a minute. I thought you said you wanted a relationship. This is what I have for you. Well, God, anything but that? No. This is what I want. But the submission to that and the willingness to go through that, how sweet is it?
It's amazing. I was going to say something else about helping people, but going back to caring for the Afghanistan people, some of them were placed in Charleston, and they have nothing still. This was like 2 months ago. Our church back home, Northwoods Baptist, they did a huge collection. People were bringing beds and bicycles and clothes, and the Afghanis came and just picked out what they wanted.
You're still a part of helping those people.
And I was like, it was amazing.
There's part of the why, right?
Yeah.
You could never have seen.
I see them driving around town now. They can't drive.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, they cannot drive. But
thanks for taking time to talk about your story, man.
Yeah, it's there's some more hidden gems in there, but I think we've talked enough about everything, and if anyone needs to talk to somebody who's been through similar stuff, my phone's always on, and I don't know if I want to give it out.
No, they can leave a comment though.
Comment on the video, and I'll reach out to you. So you are worth it.
There's a reason you're still breathing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't know why. Can we pray?
Absolutely.
Dear God, thank you so much for putting Nathan in my life. Thank you for allowing us to share you. Thank you for the community that we have that all has their own story, all about you. Help us, God, as we continue down this path of serving you, and you bring other people into our circle of influence to, number one, celebrate you first and foremost, and help us to say yes when you say, I need you to go here, I need you to go there. Thank you for Nathan. Thank you for our time together. Praise your name for it in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, man. I love you, Andy.
Love you, man.